Hi, I'm Gavin and Sarah. Welcome to Tartan Touchdown. We're Scotland's voice in conversation with the world of American football. I'm joined tonight by Sarah. Sarah, how are you?
I'm great, Gav. Thanks so much for asking. I'm excited to be back. I feel like we've been on hiatus, but we all needed a bit of a rest and a recon. So
Well,
it's nice to be back.
do you know what? For an American football podcast, we've not been too bad since the Super Bowl of getting content out there. And I guess we are speaking to a guest this evening who many of you will recognise as one of the faces of Sky Sports NFL coverage for many years. It's Nick Calling. Nick, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, pleasure. Nice to see you guys.
Listen, thanks. And how are you tonight?
Yeah, good. Thank you. Yeah. Just got back from running kids around and walking dogs and all that nonsense. You know, the drama and excitement of being a global sports broadcaster. You know.
So everything that goes along with it. Well, I mean, there's a number of things obviously we want to talk about because, as we mentioned, you have been the face of Sky Sports NFL coverage for I think 15 years. But actually, one of the sort of key events that we've been highlighting on our social media recently is that actually it's 30 years since NFL established their first full league in Europe. What was, I guess, originally the World League and would become NFL Europe and NFL Europa, I think, towards the tail end. And of course, you were one of the key voices of that. So that's something we absolutely want to ask you about this evening. But as we always do, we like to really get the whole story on our podcast. So I guess we really want to go all the way back and understand how was it you first really got into the sport of American football?
Oh, this is for people who can't sleep, isn't it? Because I'm going to bore you to death now. I get you are going to regret asking that, and anybody watching, I'd disappear for 20 minutes or so. Very, very simple. To cut a long story short, because I'm a little bit on the older side, as you can probably work out. And when I graduated from university with really no idea of what I wanted to do, I finally hit upon the fact that the only thing I really was interested in was sport. The only thing I was remotely competent at was writing. So I've got to be a sports journalist. And it took me a number of years to get there. It took me 7 years in total. But I also liked Americana. And back in 1982, Channel 4 launched with one of its flagships was American football, of which I knew nothing other than there was a team called the Dallas Cowboys, and they're the glamour team, and I always hate glamour teams, so I didn't like them. But I was working for a small American publishing company in London at the time. Those guys were very excited they were going to get to see highlights of their game because early 80s, if France was the far side of the moon, never mind America, there was no way you were getting information on anything. So these guys were missing it. And I thought, well, if this is coming on, I'll give it a go. And I liked it straight away. And I decided before that first program came on, whoever I see win the first game, that's going to be my team, not knowing anything other than the team called the Dallas Cowboys. And the first game, who I hated already. And the first game was Dallas v Pittsburgh. So I was like, well, I'll leave it till next week, actually, then, assuming that the Dallas would beat this Pittsburgh team that I'd never heard of. And I'll leave it a week. But this Pittsburgh team, just coming off the back of, it was the kind of the dying embers of that 4 Super Bowl Chuck Knowles team. And obviously they beat Dallas. I said, that's my team. They're my guys. And, a love affair was born right there. But watching it, I was like, I like it, actually. I'm not sure I understand all of it, but and then the germ of an idea formed that I'm trying to get a break as a sports journalist. If this thing takes off in this country and I kind of position myself as somebody who knows a bit about the game, which wouldn't have taken a lot in those days because nobody knew anything. I said, maybe there's a chance that I can get a couple of doors to open for me. And to cut a long story short, that's exactly what happened. I started in the mid-'80s coming up with one-off American football like magazine annuals. There were a couple of regular American football monthly magazines. I made a point of getting to know the publishers of one of them, thinking that if an editor or something ever left, because I did have a background as a magazine editor at that point, if their editor left, I might be in a good position to take the job, and that's exactly what happened in 1986. So it was lucky, but I kind of made the luck. The bubble burst on American football. The magazine went down the toilet in 1989, and I just went, well, I've had enough of this. I'm going to go freelance. And again, lucky break. That was around the time that Sky and satellite TV was starting to take off. So now there's openings in broadcasting. And I looked at that and went, I think there's a bit more money to be made there than there is just in magazines. I'll see if I can, work my way in there. I was lucky that I had a good voice, so I started doing some continuity stuff. And I'm not bragging, we've got the voice we've got. So I started out doing things like, coming up after the break, it's such, all that sort of stuff. And, I don't know how much detail you want, but basically, yes, I pushed for it. I worked at it, but I got a hell of a lot of lucky breaks as well. And American football, I can honestly say, opened up every door for me. And I really, really enjoyed watching it as well. It was always just fun to watch it. And then when I became involved on the media side of it, that was fun as well. It was never work.
That's exactly what you want it to be. And I've got to say, you should absolutely take credit for your voice, because I take credit for my height all the time. I'm 6'7". But obviously, you kind of joked at the start that obviously this is for the people that couldn't sleep. But I guess that was the whole thing with NFL back in the days. It was a late night sport. What kind of hours were you putting in covering the NFL back in the 80s?
As you say, it's a late night sport. It really is. So, yeah, you never had a Sunday night. Never had a Sunday night. And very often you didn't have a Monday morning either. So, that was one thing you learned very early on about the time difference. Like I say, when I started out just as a print guy, it didn't affect me too much, other than staying up and, watching the games on TV. I still remember seeing that first live playoff game on Channel 4. They said, we're doing a live playoff. It was a Boxing Day. And I was just watching this absolutely transfixed, because all we'd had was the highlight show, and they packaged those highlights up back then. They packaged the highlights up so well. It was very, very slick, very, very polished. But what would it be like live? And I remember watching this one. I think it was the Detroit Lions, but I could be wrong there, because they didn't get in the playoffs very often. But yeah, whoever it was, I just remember watching this for 3 hours, and 3 hours went by in about 5 minutes. It was incredible. So yeah, it did play havoc with the family life a little bit. Once work and pleasure started to fuse together, because obviously, I can now say, I'm doing it. It's my job. It's my career. This is putting bread on the table, and it was true. It was true. I couldn't get any pushback on that. So. Yeah. Then you'd have to get up after go to bed at 5 o'clock in the morning. It's a school run in 3 hours. So yeah.
And I think obviously you mentioned that obviously you started to get into television, but not only were you getting opportunities on this side of the Atlantic, but actually you got to work as a sideline reporter for the USA Network as well. Yeah. Is that right?
Yes, that was complete luck. It really was. I still look back at that and wonder how that happened. The ABC was showing games, and the secondary broadcaster was a network called USA Network. I think they're still going. And they decided to put 3 crews together to cover their games, and they had their international crew, which is only 4 games. And their exec producer decided, well, we need to have a European as a sideline reporter and have some fun with it. And I'd done a little bit of stuff with a satellite TV company that is now no more. So I had a bit of TV background, but not much. And I'd not been in Vision. Nobody had seen me other than one studio pundit role on a thing called the Volvo Bowl from Stockholm in 1988, which is, we're talking real ancient history now. And that must have had an audience of 23, if that. And that was all I'd ever done. But somebody at USA Network reached out to somebody at a PR company in London that I'd done some work for, and said, "Do you know anybody?" And one of the guys there said, "Oh, this guy Nick Halling, he's done a bit of TV," which was a stretch. It really was a stretch. And I get this bloody phone call from USA Network saying, "Can you come and be our sideline reporter for these 4 games? We've got 1 in London, 1 in Frankfurt, and 2 in Barcelona." Yes, of course. Put the phone down and go, what the hell? I know. I never appeared in front of a camera before or anything like that. And my debut, this is when I realised I might have the instincts for the job. You got to have the right instincts for a job. And I've actually just forgotten about this, but you talking to you has just reminded me. The first game I did was at London. Monarchs were playing whoever they were playing right at the start of the season. And we rehearsed the opener. This is American TV for you. We rehearsed it over and over and over and over. And these 2 guys would throw down to me, "Let's go down and join our guy on the sideline. He's from London," which I wasn't, but you know how that works. "It's Nick Halling." And then I go and I can't remember what I was supposed to say, but I said whatever. And we rehearsed and rehearsed and rehearsed. And we go live. And I'm hearing everything in my earpiece, and there's 50,000 people in there, 40,000 people, whatever it was. And all through those rehearsals, I'm hearing my cues in this earpiece. It's perfect. And as we go live, that trips and it goes mute. And this is my first ever time on TV. You know, I've never done this ever. And it was like, well, this is going to be interesting then. And it's self-preservation time, isn't it? And the guys, you could see their opener was on the big screen at Wembley. So I lip read it. And I could see when they threw down to me, and I sort of looked up, and as they threw to me, I went to the camera and went, hi, or whatever it was I said. And then did that little piece, not hearing anything, wrapped it up and turned and found someone and said, I can't hear anything. It was, I went and got my trousers changed after that, and everything was fine. But yeah, it was, as a baptism, you're not getting worse than that. And it is, it's not for everybody, but I realized then, or, through circumstances, well, maybe actually I have got whatever those, that mental kind of attitude of just get on with it, plow on with it, don't look panicked, all those things that you have to have as somebody who works on TV. I had those instincts because I had no experience at all. And instead of completely folding and crumpling, I somehow made it look seamless. And I'm not boasting because I have no idea how I did it. It was sheer nerves.
From that, really, I guess a 20-year run covering NFL and TV was born.
Well, at the end of that, I told you there were the 4 games. I did that one, and I did one in Frankfurt the following week. And they'd sent a load of clothes over, like talent gets dressed by, and I thought I had to wear this stuff. So I have to watch my language here because I'm just getting enthusiastic, and I don't normally say stuff. But I have to wear this stuff. And it was freezing in Frankfurt. But I'm stood there in this little shirt and jacket and tie, and free for 3.5 hours, whatever it was, in the winds blowing. I remember coming off and talking to the production team. I said, God, have you got a coat or anything I can wear? I mean, I'm freezing in this stuff. And they said, well, why are you wearing it? We don't care what you wear. So that was my second lesson in broadcasting. Yeah, you get given this stuff, which is the only time that's ever happened to me, by the way. As you can see, I'm wearing old stuff. I've got my old Scottish Claymores freebie from 20 years ago. I've still got all that stuff. So that was lesson number 2. And then I did the 2 in Barcelona back to back. And I remember at the end of that one, at what was going to be the Olympic Stadium, because it wasn't even the Barcelona Olympics then. And I remember just standing there, looking around in the middle of this stadium and said, well, what an incredible experience this has been. If I never do anything else in TV, at least I've had this. This has been absolutely brilliant. And, 34 years on, I'm still blagging it and getting away with it. But yeah, that was an incredible experience.
There's no better way to do it. And I guess that actually brings us on to, I guess, a good point of clarification, because I did say that this is 30 years since the NFL had a league in Europe. That's not entirely true. So the World League actually started off in 1991, which was actually a transatlantic league. So you had 2 divisions in the States, and then they had the division of 3 European teams in London.
I don't think they were even in you may be right, but I don't remember them being divisions. They just sort of, I don't know how.
I was. This is probably where you've got the expertise, because I was 7 when the NFL started.
I was only 10. Gav. I mean, I was only 10. So
this is where Sarah reveals where she was.
I was -3. So yeah, -3 in 91.
Can we get rid of her, Gav, please?
Yeah. I did joke about this earlier, actually. Gav can back me up that I joked that when we realise how young I am, I'll be asked to leave.
Yeah.
It's fine.
Yeah. How lucky you are. Yeah.
Obviously, with obviously the league moving into the European project in 1991, obviously you've been a fan of the sport for quite some time at that stage. I know there've been American Bowls, which were kind of, I guess, the forerunner to the international series. But here you had the London Monarchs in particular, a dedicated UK team. And they did really well in that initial season, pulling in the crowds. I mean, what were your thoughts in terms of seeing the league for the first time, thinking about what the future might hold at that point?
At the time, it was utter disbelief. that, something that I didn't even know existed 10 years earlier had not only sort of come to this country, but seemed to be thriving. I mean, it was built on sand. I think that's, I don't think that's giving away any secrets. But it was brilliantly hyped and brilliantly marketed. And that Monarchs team was good, and they used to win a lot. And, they created a real rock and roll atmosphere around the place and basically gave tickets away. If there were 40,000 people in there, I'd be surprised if 5,000 were paying. I really would. But they were getting bums on seats. They were creating a buzz. It looked good on TV. It looked a success. And they were a fun team to watch. And yeah, you really did think, this is going to be here to stay. But it never, where it needed to succeed early, was in the US. And those two networks that I mentioned, USA Network and more importantly ABC, they got no viewing figures at all for it. Nobody was watching it, which was a bit of a surprise when you consider it's a decent product and it's not competing with NFL. It was done in the spring and all the rest of it. So they were looking to bail very, very quickly on the deal if they could. Everything was scaled right back down for 1992. Like USA Network didn't bring a crew over to Europe or anything like that. That went. Which is how I ending up doing play-by-play commentary, but that's another story. And 1992, it was like somebody had let air out the balloon, because it had been built on shaky foundations, and the moment there was any kind of a wobble, or the moment they had to say to people, "Oh, you're going to have to pay for your tickets now," well, people didn't want to pay for tickets. So not only were people not buying the tickets, nobody's watching in the key market, and it was launched for America. Let's not kid ourselves about that. So they went, "Oh, well, we're going to shut this down," and I thought that would be the end of that. And of course, 3 years later, back it came on a more sustainable footing with a proper broadcast partner as well, not just selling rights. Fox were in the partnership with NFL as well. So, but when it went in 1992, I thought, well, we're not going to see that again. That's just going to be done. And that earlier that I talked to you about, the 80s bubble that really built up in the UK. That had burst, and we get the Vicious Boys and all this sort of stuff, and everything was just like, it became a joke sport. Late 80s, early 90s, people were not taking it seriously. It's all crash helmets and shoulder pads and nonsense, which it never was, but that's how people perceived it. So it needed to kind of build up back from that, and it did again. When it did come back in 95, it did start off at a low base, but it was a more realistic base, so it had a chance, I think, to go and develop somewhere. And for 10, 12 years, whatever it was, it rolled along.
Yeah, and I think that it's a really important point you make there, just in terms of, I guess, having that sustainable base, because we talked about the London Monarchs and how I think when they won the World Bowl, it was 62,000 that they managed to attract to Wembley for that particular game. Then when the league returned in 1995, I think certainly in the case of the Monarchs, they were probably drawing, I think, in the region of 15,000. I think the Claymores...
In 95?
I think so.
Nowhere near.
Wow.
Single figures. Yeah.
So it just shows you the kind of change of numbers. I think maybe I'm thinking of 96 when it got a bit of traction again. But obviously it dropped off quite significantly from that initial spike, I guess you'd have to call it, in terms of the first league. But with that, obviously, as you mentioned, that's where you started to move into the commentary booth as well. So, and obviously that developed from the second season of the league. So talk to us a bit about kind of changing roles, going from the sideline reporter to actually calling play-by-play.
Yeah, I mean, it was just another step into the unknown for me, because never having been a sideline guy and not knowing what that even entailed, because you weren't even watching American TV in those days, really. Other than I don't remember the networks that covered the NFL in the 80s. They particularly had sideline people. Maybe they did, but that was something that kind of developed. So what the reason I got involved is that there was a broadcaster that no longer exists in Europe in the UK, it was called Screen Sport. People with very, very long memories and very, very sad social lives might remember Screen Sport, but it did not. It was not a major player at any point. But I'd started doing some work for them on other different things, even weirder things. And they knew about my American football background, obviously, because I made sure they knew that I had that background. And they picked up the rights that USA Network had lapsed on for the European stuff. But of course, USA Network, they're not sending a crew over anymore. And the producer, who was a buddy of mine and still is a buddy of mine, just called me one day and said, well, you're going to be the commentator. What? Bearing in mind, I'd hardly done at that point any commentary of any sort. I mean, I think I'd done a Brazilian football match and a bit of 10-pin bowling from somewhere and a little bit of boxing. And it's like, commentate on an American football game. I mean, really? I can't do that. He said, well, you've got no choice. You're doing it, was his exact words. And I knew Mike Carlson from before then anyway. And, suggested Mike. I might have suggested Mike, or they might have known Mike themselves. But anyway, Mike came in as the colour man. And Mike had never done that either. I mean, Mike knows the game, but he'd never done that role either. So the two of us are sitting there just jabbering away at Wembley Stadium. And, I don't know who the one-eyed man, the land of the blind, the one-eyed man's his king. I'm not sure we had an eye between us. I mean, really had no clue. What we did have was a very veteran director, and the directors are the guys that cut all the pictures and cut the cameras, and they drive the thing when it's live on air. Very, very important people. You get a good director, you know about it, and if you get a bad director, you know about it as well. And this guy happened to be the guy who'd been the USA Network director as well. He was almost like a consultant now so that he'd come over. So I knew him and he knew me. So he gave me a few little tips. But the biggest tip of all was, if it's not happening on the TV screen, it's not happening. And I remember this one incident. Mike and I are in full flow talking about whatever we're talking about. And I just hear in the earpiece, the guy is saying to us, monitor, guys, monitor. And this is this director saying that. And it's Mike talking now. I mean, if it had been me, I would have ignored it as well. But it was Mike talking. And he's getting louder and louder and louder on this. Until the end, he just screams at us, will you, beep, beep, beeps, look at the beep, beep, beep monitor? And of course, that froze us both dead. And we're looking, and he's found something he's talking about, and we're talking about something completely different. And that was such a good lesson to learn there, that, it doesn't matter what you're saying as a commentator. If it's not on the screen, it doesn't matter. You have to reflect what's on the screen somehow. That was, but I'll never forget that jolt of electricity. A guy, I don't know what I'm doing. No question about it. And I'm now listening to somebody who does know what he's doing. And, it's time to learn and, okay, take this seriously. But, yeah, that was another ridiculous white knuckle ride. Luckily for me, when Fox came into the picture in 1995, they had an exec vice president on the project. He'd heard some of my stuff and he liked it. Now, the vagaries of this business, he could have heard that stuff and not liked it, in which case I would never have been heard from again. So he's got a few people to apologise to. But no, I mean, in all seriousness, it's such a subjective business. Broadcasting, it really is. You see a presenter, you hear a commentator, whatever it is, you like them, you don't like them. Doesn't make them good, doesn't make them bad. You like them or you don't like them. I was lucky, this guy liked me, so I was a fixture. And Sky wanted me on it as well because they wanted a British, not me as such, they wanted it was nice for them to have a British presence. So I basically was offered the job. I didn't even have to ask for it. I was just told, right, we want you to do it, which doesn't happen very often either. So that's how I ended up doing it. It was actually Fox. I was doing stuff at Sky more as a sort of freelance feature producer and occasional reporter. I'd done Premier League reports, post-match reports and all that sort of stuff. I was doing stuff for them. So they knew me. And then when they did the deal with American football, it was like, well, you're an obvious bloke to, come in and do it as you've done it before. So again, luck.
Well, I guess it just shows time. You could have been another Chris Kamara if you kept on the football lane for a while.
Probably not, but yeah.
I mean, obviously, that's a really good point, actually, just about that move into the commentary because actually Sarah, in a couple of weeks, is going to be having her first shot at
if she's not caught drinking a mouthful of drink whilst on air,
I know, sorry.
Yeah. You're a professional at all times, Sarah. You wouldn't catch me jumping up and down in the studio and showing I'm wearing jeans or eating a sandwich or anything.
So Sarah Sarah myself will actually be calling play-by-play in stadium, I should say, rather than on a stream or on a
cool.
On TV. But what advice then would you give to Sarah as someone doing comms for the first time?
Get someone else to do the job.
Right, sounds good to me. I'll just get this guy to do it. I'll just get Gav to do it. It's fine.
Outsource.
You're doing the stadium announcing, are you?
We're doing stadium announcing.
Okay. So it's
and-
basically down and distance, isn't it? Who's made the play? Who's made the play? Who's made the tackle? Yeah. In the stadium, you can stick to fairly basic things and just say, gain of 4. Smith on the tackle, whatever it is. When I did those live, I always had what's known as a spotter, someone who's going to help you with the numbers. And my spotter always was on the defensive side of things. His job was tell me who's made the tackle, because I can usually see who's making the run or who's making the catch. And by the way, I had to learn those numbers off by heart, which you probably won't have to in that role, but I did. So I had someone there just to say, would point at number 43 on my sheet, and I'd just say, "Oh, there's Johnson on the tackle," and then shut up and wait for the expert to come in and elaborate. But yeah, keep it simple, keep it, knowing what you're doing. You're not going to have to editorialize in that role. You're not going to have to analyze in that role. It's just an information thing, and I'm sure you'll be fine. But I've never done it, actually, funny enough. So I wouldn't take my advice.
You're going to smash it, Sarah.
Yeah, listen. I'm an actor by trade, so like I can make mountains out of molehills. It's fine.
Yeah.
I'm actually more worried about Gav than I'm about me.
There's actually a lot of crossover between what I do as a freelance sports broadcaster and acting, because as you know, it's like somebody says to you, "Can you ride a horse?" It's like, "Yeah," and then you'll go and get lessons. Yeah, and then because somebody's offering me a gig here riding a horse, I'll go and get riding lessons. It's the same for me. And that happens all the time for me. The jobs you go for that you're actually qualified to get, you can't get, and then someone says, "Oh, can you do a bit of clay pigeon shooting?" Yeah, no problem at all. And then you get straight on YouTube and see how that works. So yeah. So you'll be fine. You'll smash that. As you say, it's Gav you've got to worry about.
That's it. Theory.
I'm the personality hire here, so that's why I know I'll be fine.
Right.
I guess we mentioned obviously going back to NFL Europe or World Leagues it was at the time. So you mentioned the league came back in 1995, and you were actually covering the first ever Scottish Claymores game at Murrayfield in 1995, which I didn't really start following the team till the following year, but YouTube is a wonderful thing. So it was not the most illustrious of starts, both for the Claymores or the league. It was quite a wet day. But what was your recollection of that?
That first year was horrendous because they were doing it on the cheap, and me and Mike were doing Claymores and Monarchs games, which were basically 2 games in 2 days. And it would be Saturday night in Amsterdam or Germany, first plane either into London or Scotland. And by the time you did that second game, you had no clue what the hell you were watching. I do remember being at Murrayfield and thinking, this is way too big for this. There's nobody there. Is it going to catch on? I don't know. There was a lad I knew there, Scott Cooper. We had a bit of a connection, actually, which was a funny one, because back in 1989, I think it was, I'd just been made redundant from the American Football Magazine, and I did some PR work that summer for what was called then the Coca-Cola League, which was the British American Football League. And the job entailed I had to go to a game every Sunday and then do a bit of work on the Monday and Tuesday and try and drum up some media interest and all the rest of it. But I always got sent to a game. And, for a guy from Southampton, one day I got sent to Gateshead v Glasgow. So, it took however many hours it took to get up there. And Glasgow at the time, Glasgow Lions it was, and at the time they had a receiver who got into an American college or something. It was a bit of a story because that wasn't happening much in those days. And this guy's name was Sean Airley. And I don't think he was there, but everyone was talking about this lad. But I saw this other kid, and I sound like a real talent scout now. This is the one I got right in 30 years. And it was a little 19-year-old streak of nothing called Scott Cooper, who had no speed but had terrific discipline, ran very tight routes and had superb hands. And I remember just going up and having a chat with him and his best mate, was a little running back called Jimmy Burns, who was about half my size, but 10 times tougher, and would run into a brick wall, and did regularly. And we had a lovely little chat, and it was like, "Oh, all the best to you, really nice to see you." And I'm thinking I'm never going to see him again. And then lo and behold, he makes the team. So I was right. He was a talent. There, I got one right. But yeah, no. In all seriousness, it was nice to see Scott there, and and it was so we'd catch up, and he'd tell me how he was enjoying it and all the rest of it. It was great to see him flourish and develop into a very, very good receiver. Actually, he was very good, Scott. I remember the Amsterdam Admirals head coach, a guy called Al Luganbill, in I think it might have been 95, maybe 96. But Scott caught a lot of balls against Amsterdam, probably got a touchdown as well, and really, really sort of, I wouldn't say dominated the game, but he made a big, big contribution. And for the return game, we'd always talk to the head coach of both teams. What's the game plan with this, that, and the other. That was a pre-game production meeting. He said to me, he said, that's Scott Cooper. He said, he changed it from we to I. Didn't think he was a player. Didn't think he was real. I'm not making that mistake again. And it was like, that's the biggest validation you can have, that the coach is saying, oh, we ignored you and look what you did to us. We're not ignoring you anymore. So good player he was. Good player, good bloke as well. Hopefully he's watching this sometime.
Well, I mean, he went on to have a fantastic career, as you say, within NFL Europe. So I think he played 9 of the Claymore's 10 seasons. He had a mini retirement, but got lured back for a second run. But one of the interesting things actually with a lot of NFL Europe is, of course, there's the names that came in with name value. So there's the likes of Doug Williams was coaching the Claymores in '95. William the Fridge Perry playing for the London Monarchs. But then you also had the names that would come on to something. And I guess one interesting bits of trivia I found out is that playing for Rhine Fire, actually, in the first ever Claymores game was a young future actor called Terry Crews.
Yeah, Brooklyn Nine-Nine. Yeah. Because I don't know if you've been stalking me or something. I started watching Brooklyn Nine-Nine literally a few weeks ago, and I'm looking at this Terry Crews, and I'm going, you're familiar. I don't know where from, but you are familiar. So, onto Wikipedia, it was like, oh, Rhine Fire. Yeah. I mean, I don't remember him from the Rhine Fire, if that makes sense, but there's obviously some little echo there somewhere. And yeah, I mean, he's gone on to, have a very good career as an actor. 1 or 2, but the original 91 team, Goldberg, the wrestler, he was on one of those teams. He was a big WWE star going back a few years now as well. So there are a few of those characters floating around. But yeah, and James Harrison, I'm sure you're going to mention James Harrison. You're going to say, oh, well, as a Steelers fan, what impact did he make on you? None at all. I never saw him play. I don't think I ever saw him play, because when I found out that he was NFL Europe, I'm going into my research going, no, he's not. This is Ryan Fire. Oh, yes, he is. Did I do any of those games? Well, yeah, I did a couple of those games. Did he resonate with me at all? No, never saw him make a play.
And I guess that's the thing. I mean, we all know like the success stories. I mean, Kurt Warner obviously being a big one. Adam Vinatieri was another alumni of NFL Europe. But I guess who stood out to you at the time? Was anyone that you saw play in the league and thought, wow, they're going to make it big?
They're obvious, yeah. Two stood out for me, both quarterbacks. One you mentioned, Kurt Warner, he stood out. Simple as that. I mean, it was, you watched him and it's like, what are you doing here, really? I mean, I didn't know how good he would go on to be. I don't think anybody did. But it was like, how the hell have you slipped through the cracks? Because you've just got all the tools, And another one who did go on and have a decent career he was in Barcelona, may have been at the same time as John Kittner. John had the same tools as well. Brad Johnson at London, played on a really ropey London team, and he had tremendous leadership qualities, really good. But that team was so bad, you didn't know if whether he would make it or not, and he did. And I think the biggest surprise from the quarterbacks for me was Frankfurt one year had 2 quarterbacks. They're kind of their starter and their backup, and the coach was playing them both. And the starter was all mouth, and you knew about him if he was in the room, you heard him, you saw him, he was a rah-rah guy, and the backup was, just came in and did a job and went off again. And he was Jake Delhomme. And if you'd said to me, "Oh, do you think?" I mean, not that I'm any kind of expert, but if you'd said to me, "Oh, does Jake Delhomme look like the kind of guy you can see making it in the NFL?" Not a chance. But then again, you don't know what the coach is looking for. You don't know what scouts are looking for. You don't know what they bring. Apparently, Jake was not a good practice player. And when you're trying to make a team, if you don't practice well, you don't obviously get any kind of look. It's like he was one of those guys, the red light had to be on, and then you'd get the best of him. But yeah, he was, for me, the biggest surprise that he was as good as he was from being. I mean, he wasn't bad. He wasn't a bad player or anything like that. He didn't perform badly, but he didn't stand out at all. The one that I thought would have made it and didn't, and I'm always baffled about it, was one of the early Claymores, running back called Saran Stacey. You remember him?
That's right.
Yeah,
played,
great player. Super guy.
Years.
Yeah, super guy. And a lot of people looked at Saran and go, he couldn't get it. He couldn't get signed by anybody. I mean, he just couldn't get signed. And it was like, there's got to be something going on here. But he wasn't a bad guy. There was no skeletons in the closet or anything else like that. But he could do it all. You'd see a lot of running backs, and this was one thing I learned, and I actually learned it from talking to a scout. I was sat next to a scout from the New Orleans Saints one day, and I just said, what are you looking for when you see these running backs? I was having to mention it. And he said, first thing I'm looking for, I'm looking for one thing. Can they pick up the blitz? Can they pass protect? So it's not how they run. It's not how they catch, all the stuff we're looking at, But in the modern NFL, and it's probably still that way, as a running back, unless your name was Barry Sanders, if you couldn't pick up the blitz, you weren't much use to anybody because you had to be able to pass protect. And he'd be looking at these guys saying, can't pick up the blitz, can't stop anybody, can't use him. Doesn't matter how good he is, can't use him.
It's all the extra things. I mean, certainly, I guess some of the big names that fans of the Claymores will probably remember progressing to the NFL were the likes of Yo Murphy, Aaron Stecker. Both actually really carved their names out in special teams.
Yes.
In terms of that progression. So it's about how you can find that role and that way to contribute.
Yeah. Yeah. Yo was, I mean, he was a good player. I mean, obviously, played in the Super Bowl. That was, oh God, you're jogging my memory here. Because being out at the Super Bowl, my credential allowed me access onto the field pre-game. I mean, as I'm strutting around the field on the Super Bowl, you can just imagine, like, how on earth am I doing this? And Yo, because he was special teams, was one of the first out for practice. I think he was with the Rams that year. And obviously I knew him. And we just went over. We had a chat for about 5 minutes, just the two of us in the middle of the field at whatever Super Bowl it was. And it's, oh, crikey, come a long way from whatever that awful hotel was in the middle of Glasgow. I forget what the hotel, but the haunted one right by the station. And it's like, mate,
it's so crazy. I think it might have actually been was it the actual Central Hotel?
It may have been, yeah. I just remember we used to go there. Some floor nobody would go on. Even the players were scared of going on this floor because it was haunted or something. So but it was like, mate, you have come a long, long way.
That was done well. But I mean, obviously we talked about some of the players' experiences, but I guess you covered the league for a number of years. What were some of your favourite experiences? There's one that we've been made aware of as well that maybe come back to, but just in terms of your favourite memories covering the league.
For me, I think it was the buzz, because what Fox started doing was they started bringing in co-commentators that they were basically trying out, analysts. So you'd have current or recent players coming in. So you'd be sat next to various characters that you'd watch playing, and I just had so many laughs with some of them. Not all of them, some of them, and some of them weren't very good. This was another thing that would surprise me. We had this one guy, and I'm not going to mention his name because he was the nicest guy. And he was a hell of a player. You'd have wanted him on your team. And he was a current player, absolute stud of a player, and a lovely guy. The minute we started talking, he jammed up. He could not say 3 words. And I am doing everything I can to help him because he's got the knowledge. But he just stood there and froze. And, it was the counterbalance to what I was saying about, I could have frozen when my earpiece went down and somehow I fished it out of the fire. And this guy went, ugh. And obviously never made it in broadcasting. But, it was great to be working with someone like that. And I pulled my influence to work with Levon Kirkland of the Pittsburgh Steelers one year. I'd said to the exec producer at Fox, I said, I think Levon will be good. Like, what did I know? I just wanted to work with Levon Kirkland. It's like, so following year, there's Levon. And, I worked with a guy called Bill Maas, who was with the Kansas City Chiefs, and Bill and I just clicked. I mean, we're still Facebook friends, don't talk much, but, still Facebook buddies and all the rest of it. I worked with Chris Carter, who, Chris and I were about as opposite as you could get as people, but we had the same sense of humour. So we just got on. We really enjoyed each other's company. And bless his soul, because he's no longer with us, Kevin Green, the old linebacker. And you might have heard of that story, so I'll let you come onto it in case. You go. Yeah.
We know, Nick, that you're a big fan of football tourism, and you mentioned wrestlers, actually, because Kevin Green had a second act in wrestling himself.
Yes.
But I believe you'd actually taken him to one of the great Glasgow football grounds in Firhill to see the mighty Partick Thistle take on Stirling Albion. So how did that go down?
See, people listening to this are thinking we're all on something now. Kevin Green went to watch. It was the end of the season, obviously, because the seasons cross over, and I think Partick Thistle were in the third tier at that time. May have been the second tier, but it certainly wasn't the Premiership. And they're playing Stirling Albion at the end of the season, and absolutely nothing was on the line for either of these two teams. They weren't going up, they weren't going down, and there's about 2,000 people in there. One side, the rest of the bloody ground's been condemned. You can't go in there. And we'd finished our production meetings, as I knew we would, and I just sort of announced more to myself than anything else. I said, right, I'm off to watch the local football team, or soccer team, I'll probably call it for them, Partick Thistle. And I remember Kev just lit up, and he went, "I'm with you, buddy." And did you know Kev? I mean, do you remember Kev? He had long blonde hair, about 6'4", but an athlete, unlike you, Gav. I mean, he would have, he was a real character, a real big-hearted person, and the sort of person, if you're in the room with him, you're not going to miss him. And I'm sort of looking at this going, Kev, I can't take you to Partick Thistle v Stirling Albion, mate. That's my weird thing. I can't inflict this on anybody. And he said, no, I'm going. I said, well, all right, okay, and off we go. We go to Partick Thistle, and they had these turnstiles. They were solid metal, all wrought iron, rusting, no gaps through at all, because everybody's trying to squeeze through the gaps. And I can get through. And Kevin, a bloody outside linebacker within the NFL, they didn't build the turnstiles for outside linebackers. Kev squeezes through, but doesn't squeeze through enough. And one of these bars catches his coat and just rips it as he keeps going. So we start with that. He's ripped his coat, and I'm thinking, it's a great start, this. And Partick Thistle, their poor little right back, whoever he was, made a mistake in the first 2 minutes, falls over. The Stirling Albion player goes in and scores, and the place around us erupts. It is vile poison being hurled from the stands, primarily at this poor right back, but just generally. And there's one woman in particular, she is screeching right behind us. And it's one of those screechy voices that's like fingers down a black, and this doesn't stop. It's not like, a moment of frustration and then the game restarts. This was the opening of a floodgate. And this carried on. And Kev, I noticed, started getting smaller and smaller in his chair. He was sort of shrinking. And he looked behind him at one point at this woman. And she said, "And what are you looking at?" I can't do the accent. And she said, "And what are you looking at?" And Kev spun around and went down like that. And he leaned over into me and he said, "This is worse than the black hole." You know what the black hole is? That's where the Oakland Raiders fans were. And he said, "Man, I have never experienced anything like this. This is worse than the black hole." And it was like, I did tell you, Kev, this is Partick Thistle may not be the place for you, but he said he loved it. But yeah, I mean, there's a trivia question for you. I mean, I don't know who'd answer it, but yes. And then the following week we were in Berlin, and we were assigned a driver who got a minivan for us, and Kev just decided he would drive it, and it was like a scene out of a bad Hollywood movie. He's running into those awnings that come down from shops. He's knocking them down. He's going on the wrong side of the road. He's swerving because he doesn't know what a roundabout is. He's gone the wrong, and we're all sitting in the back there. Kev's going, "Yeah, this is great, isn't it?" We're going, "Yes, Kev, it's wonderful. Yeah, it's fantastic. We're loving it." But I mean, a lovely, lovely guy. So I guess to answer your question, that was the big thrill for me, who I'm working with this week. And, for everyone that was either not very interesting or not very good, you'd have characters like that are giving you memories that are literally going to stay with me forever.
It's fantastic. And actually, one of the things you touched on is just, I guess, the places you got to go to as well, because it's sports coverage has changed in some ways that a lot of the time it will actually be people looking at a stream now, but actually you got to go around to the very different stadiums and countries that hosted the NFL Europe games. And I guess the venues that really jump out to me. I want to ask what was it like covering those games in Germany, where it really just seemed to snowball, and sometimes you'd be getting 40, 50,000 fans in Rhein or Dusseldorf and Frankfurt.
Yeah, they weren't papering in Dusseldorf and Frankfurt. They were genuine sales. Frankfurt in particular, and I remember people saying, "Oh, well, it must be all just the local US air bases." It wasn't. It was genuine German fans that they bought all the stuff. They wanted that American experience, and they created their own American experience. That in those two countries, Amsterdam a lot less, Barcelona even less, and the UK, Scotland had a bit more than London, I think, but that's probably not saying an awful lot. But yeah, it was fabulous just to see how it had taken off and developed there. And I do remember going to the Rheinstadion and thinking, wow, what a stadium this is, and the Galaxy Stadium as well, which I'd done that game in '91 for, and thinking, oh, I'm never going to see this place again. And then you come back 4 or 5 years later, and it's absolutely packed. It was great. One of my favourite games, actually, I did it with Bill Maas in Frankfurt. I think it was the '96 season. That was the year Scotland won the World Bowl, wasn't it?
That's right, yeah.
Yeah, and Frankfurt were unbeaten at home, and they'd had a player on their team as a defensive back, James somebody. He made the NFL. Oh, I wish I could remember his name. And he got cut and went to Scotland.
James Fuller.
James Fuller, thank you. James Fuller. James Fuller played the game of his life. I mean, he played like a man who had been personally insulted. And Frankfurt, who I think were unbeaten, but don't quote me on that, they were certainly the highest scoring team in the league. They got 0. And James Fuller was intercepting everything, knocking down everything, knocking out everybody, and seemed to be playing free safety, left cornerback, middle linebacker, outside defensive. He was all over the field. And me and Bill in particular, we just latched onto that energy that he was bringing just from the field. It was like for him, it wasn't about winning the game. It was they get 0. They get 0, and they shut him down. It was an outstanding. Ray Willsey would have put the defense together. Ray, the old coach, absolute wonderful man. Boy, I'd love to sit and close a bar with Ray wherever we were. Not because it was rabble rousing. He was too old for that. But Ray had stories. You just sit and listen. These guys that have been there, seen it, and done it all, and it's just that they're telling you stuff and they're not even bragging, and you're just sitting there going, "This is incredible! I can't believe what I'm hearing. I can't believe how lucky I am to sit here." And it'd be like, "Oh, don't close the bar yet. Ray's got another story here." So, yeah, lovely game.
I mean, there's definitely footage out there on YouTube, I think, of you remarking on fans leaving early from Frankfurt, which never happened. So, we'll need to dig that out for you, because I've definitely watched that a few times. But I guess the big highlight, probably not just from that season, but I guess for anyone who remembers the Claymores, was, of course, winning the World Bowl in '96, which, of course, you got to call as well. So I guess, probably we've seen bigger crowds now with the international series, but at the time, just shy of 40,000 fans on a uncharacteristically hot summer day in Scotland. Seen Scotland win the World Bowl. What's your recollections of that game?
Marcus Thomas picking up a fumble to start the game. That's the big thing that I remember. It was like, well, who wrote this script? It was just like, you're the home team, you've packed the place out, and the first thing that happens is the other guy's coughed the ball up and your guy pounces on it, and it's 6 points. You can't lose. Blow the final whistle now. It's done. So, but Marcus, who I can't remember who the main running back that year was. It might have been Saran, because Marcus hardly got to play. And he was quite frustrated about it. That it's like, well, what am I doing wrong? So he had to, like a lot of these guys, if you're not playing particularly, you've got to make your mark on special teams. So it was lovely to see him get that opportunity. And there was a few of the other British lads. Was Rob Hart the kicker? No, was it Gavin Hastings was the kicker?
Yeah, Gavin Hastings at the time. Rob Hart, I think, came 99.
Yeah. I remember I could see him, and his rugby background, and you could almost see it's like, They paid him a bit of money to come and be the guy, like they were doing in every other place as well, obviously. But you could see him. I remember thinking over the course of the season, you're transforming from a guy that's just a bit of a gimmick, and I'll do my best because he's a competitor. International rugby player, a competitor, and suddenly he properly became a member of that team, and he wanted it. You could see that meant as much to him as a rugby international as well. But yeah, the atmosphere was fabulous that day. It really, really was. And I haven't, the memory does blur because to me, once a game's gone, it's gone. I don't really remember much about it unless it was Super Bowl 40 and the Steelers, which is stuck in the memory. But from what I remember, Scotland made quite hard work of winning that in the end. It was not a walk in the park for them, was it? They really had to show some character and dig it out because it was Frankfurt, wasn't it? It was Frankfurt.
It's Frankfurt again for third.
Frankfurt came back. They really came back. Yeah, so it became a very intense game. They're the kind of games you like to do as a commentator because that your job's easy then. You go with the action. You don't have to create or generate anything yourself. If the game's good, you just you follow it. You don't try and lead any kind of conversation. And that game flew by because it was so intense.
I think I guess moving on from what was a great highlight certainly for Scottish fans. I guess the league had some successes, but really you got to see that transition as teams would move increasingly towards Germany, and eventually the product of NFL Europe basically became wrapped up in the NFL focus and other things like the international series. So what was your kind of reflection on the fact that you saw that the sport was growing? I think I recall 2005, 6, 7, Sky would be putting more and more coverage on NFL, but obviously the European project itself really wasn't hitting the mark.
That's exactly right, and I saw that coming, and I think bearing in mind I'm a freelance, I'm not on I'm not on a Sky staff or anything like that. I realised that this. My sixth sense was that I can't rely on this being there for the next 10 years. So I'll keep as much as I love it and I want to be involved in doing it. I remember after those first 3 or 4 years thinking I've got to just spread my base a little bit because this is going to go pop any day now. And I can't just be left high and dry, not earning any money. So I could see it coming, and you could see it coming at all levels. Fox started to send over people that were inexperienced in the roles of producers and directors to give them experience. And some of them were very good. I mean, some very, very good people that Fox now use. I mean, Fox's number one guy, worked on it back in 95, 96. He was good then, but they started bringing a lot younger people, a lot more inexperienced people there. So the quality of what we started to do went south a little bit, quite a lot, actually, in my opinion. But then also the team started to send less and less quality as well. That was very noticeable, and a number of teams would basically they might have fished some names out of a hat, quite frankly, that they had no interest in it. It was like, yeah, well, we might as well sign this guy, send him over to Barcelona or whatever it is. So I got wind of that, and I think any time in a partnership like that, both sides are just saying, well, we're not really sort of giving this our best. The writing's pretty clearly on the wall, isn't it? But having said that, they'd given it a big push, and the only place that they were seeing any significant growth was one country. Getting nothing in Barcelona, getting nothing in England at all. Not much better in Scotland. Amsterdam was whatever, nothing special. And I think if you were a senior executive looking at it and looking at your balance sheets and all the rest of it, at what point are you going to say, well, okay, we've given this, 6, 7, 8 years, whatever it is there any point in going on? I think my surprise was that it actually went on as long as it did, if I'm honest with you, because for me, by 2000, you could see it was unlikely really to develop to the kind of level that they would have wanted it to. So, we were lucky. When did it end? Was it 05, 06? I can't even remember.
I think the final season of NFL Europe was 2007. The Claymores scrapped in 2004. The Monarchs moved to Berlin in 99. So, yeah, there's been a transition over quite several years to name in particular.
All my memories, as might have come across, they're all 90s. I don't remember much into the 2000s at all. I mean, there were no players coming through for me particularly, other than, the two obvious stadiums. There was nothing going on, and it just became, and I suppose when you've done it, you've been to Barcelona 6 times or whatever it is, going the 7th time is not quite the thrill, and there's only 3,000 people in the building, and I don't want to sound blasé, but I think it was, and now you're working with some other guy who can't string 3 words together, and a producer who actually can't do the job, which did happen a couple of times. You're just sitting there going, well, there's no point in putting 100% of everything I've got into this and really caring about it, because nobody else bloody cares. Sorry, I hope I'm allowed to say bloody, but sorry about that. But yeah, nobody else seemed to care the way a lot of us that were there, in the 90s, we did. We really, we cared about it and we loved it, and we felt very sort of. Band of brothers sounds such a horrible cliche, but we did all know each other. Whether you were on the TV side, whether you were on the, the suits, the PR people, we were all on the same page, all wanting the same things, all pushing in the same direction, and all dealing with crazy situation after crazy situation after crazy situation. The craziest of which was Amsterdam couldn't have their arena one game. The Amsterdam arena was out, so they went into the old Olympic arena from 1924. Can't remember who they were playing. It was probably was it Claymores?
I think I know what's coming here. Was it Claymores they played in this game?
Right. Yeah. If it was in Amsterdam, it must have been Claymores or Monarchs. And anyway, we get there, and luckily the NFL's head of officiating, a guy called Mike Pereira, who was very, very good, he was there as well. He happened to be there as well. Because we walk in, and the first thing you do when you get there is you kind of pretend you're a player, and you go and walk on the field, and you say, oh yeah, I'm just checking out what the field looks like, but actually you're striding around, say, yeah, look at me, I'm not part of this. And we looked in this one end zone, and there's bits of glass and springs, and bed springs and bits of metal. There was a metal pole, and there's about 70 or 80 of these things protruding out of the end zone. And I'm looking at this going, I'm no expert, but I'm not sure you want to be diving around on this. You're going to be getting some serious flesh wounds. And Mike Pereira, the head of the NFL officials, was looking at this and said, well, we can't go in here. This is a safety issue. So somebody came up with the idea to save the day, that every drive, instead of going that way, every drive would go that way. So after a turnover or a punt or anything, the teams would then flip around. And it must have looked awful on TV. It must have looked so unprofessional. And, we now as a broadcast group go, well, how do we have to explain this? And of course, that's down to me. I've got to be the guy that explains it.
You're the messenger.
Yeah. So we came up with something, and I remember, because I didn't want us all to look ridiculous either. So I'm saying, well, obviously the player's safety comes first, so that's why we're doing this. Making it sound like it was a positive. And the president of the NFL Europe at that time, good guy, Bill Peterson. I mean, Bill, poor old Bill, probably never seen anything like this in his life. And I like Bill. If he sees this, I'm not knocking Bill. I'm really not. Bill, just when we went on air, stormed into our booth, whoever I was with. Just, don't you dare say anything bad about the league over this. It's like, yeah, all right, Bill, relax. He'd obviously just had the biggest PR disaster I mean, how bad could that look? So we had to sort of muddle through with this ridiculous, and of all the things that happened in NFL Europe, and there were so many, and we'd be here till tomorrow if I went through everything I can remember, but that was the one, the end zone that you couldn't even walk in without risking getting, tetanus or something. I mean, it was just unbelievable.
Yeah, there's so many different memories with that. But I guess from one-way games in Europe to the growth of the game in terms of the NFL league itself. So you had, of course, been acting as a pundit for the NFL coverage from, I think, 95 onwards.
Yeah.
But you went on to become studio regular.
Yes.
And work in the NFL. And you'd mentioned a number of great former players that you'd played with, but actually another, I guess, great, when we think of American football in the UK, you've got to work with is Kevin Cadle.
Yeah.
Tell us just a bit about your experiences working with Kev.
Kev, I mean, I'm almost about to crack up again here, so bear with me. But Kev's one of the best guys you could ever have met. I mean, genuinely one of the best guys you could ever meet. But when he first got the job, they gave it to him because he was American. Now, this is TV execs, and they're thinking, oh, you're American, you can present that. Kev had never been a presenter. Kev was a basketball player and coach. So, you're asking him, A, to do a new job, and B, basically cover a new sport. Yes, he knew the fundamentals, but that was all. It's like put me on a rugby game. I know the fundamentals, but I don't know anything about rugby. But the way Kev, for the first couple of years, covered that was his work ethic. So Kev would cover every single base you could possibly imagine. But because he didn't know the game, he was covering bases that didn't need to be covered. And so you'd be getting these questions thrown at you, like, oh, they're number 4 in the AFC on second down conversion. Because, you'd have to sort of say, it doesn't matter, Kev, it doesn't matter. But you couldn't fault the work ethic. And after a couple of years, I felt I had to carry him because I did, in terms of the knowledge. And it probably didn't look very good and sound very good because I was doing all the talking to try and cover that Kev didn't really know the game that well. Kev learned the game pretty quick. I mean, it didn't take him very long because, as I say, he had that work ethic. And Kev was just the fun guy, the funniest guy you could meet. But Sky back then, especially, we were very buttoned up. So everything's on and makeup and yes, which is very important. It's round 6 of the regular season, and Kev bought into that. And there was the exec producer and a bunch of us had gone out one night, and Kev's just doing what Kev's doing, holding court, telling stories, making everybody laugh. And I was with the exec, and he said, I wish we could get that Kev on screen. And I just said to him, I said, well, if you want that, trust me, I'll have a go here. And I decided I would lighten him up. And the first thing I ever did like that was we did an injury report. And I remember this so clearly. This is how long it goes. Barry Sanders was a player. Deion Sanders was a player. And Arizona had a wide receiver called Frank Sanders. And they were all on the injury list. And one was going to play, one wasn't going to play, and one they didn't know about. So I go on a riff about, Barry Sanders is in, Deion Sanders is out, and Frank Sanders we don't know. I said, so that's brought you up to date, but I got nowhere on Colonel Sanders. And he looked at me, frozen, like, what did you just say? And I went, gotcha, Kev, gotcha. And then he started laughing, just naturally laughing. And from that moment, we just loosened everything up. And if we got bored, we'd just start riffing. We'd just start having some fun. And that's when he started to come out. And then we'd get a third guest would come in, and someone like Jeff Reinbold would fit straight into that. Others did as well, to varying degrees. We would just go off on little flights of fancy sometimes if we just got bored, because you had to. You're in there 7 hours. Sometimes we're doing 3 games a day. But yeah, to go back to answer your question, you would struggle to find a nicer, funnier, more genuine human being than Kev. He could have been the worst presenter in the world. He could have known nothing about American football, and I wouldn't have cared less. He became a very, very, very good friend. Well, you get me going here. It's years ago, but yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think, like you say, just such a big, both you and Kev, such a big part of, so many fans coming into the sport. I mean, obviously now, everyone, it's not even just Sky Sports, it's Scott Hansen everyone talks about, but obviously, that's how it was, for a good 15, 20 years was,
yeah.
It was just Sunday night, 9:30 or 9 o'clock game, Sky Sports was the most of the week. And you were lucky enough to commentate on 18 Super Bowls as well.
I went to 18 Superbowls. I commentated on a lot of them, but I went to 18, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I
don't know why I'm making that difference, that distinction. I'm so lucky that I went to one. So yeah, but yeah, sorry.
No, I think you maybe tipped your hand already, but you must. Do you have any kind of favourite moments?
Yeah.
From those Super Bowls.
Yeah. There was one big one. Super Bowl 40. I mean, I'm a Southampton fan. We won the cup in 1976 when I wasn't old enough to buy a ticket. So I had, at that point in my life, and actually still have never seen a team I cared about actually win something and be there present to witness it. And suddenly here I'm in Detroit and I'm a Motown fan. The Rolling Stones are playing half time. That's my band. We've had Aretha Franklin doing the pre-game show, Goddess, and the Steelers are in it. I think it was probably one of the worst Super Bowls ever. I think there were like 2 big plays in it. but the Steelers won it. You know, it was the Willie Parker 75-yard touchdown run, and that was about it. I think it was. Oh no, and the flea flicker, Randall L. Yeah. But it was a terrible game. Those were the two highlights. But that, to me, was I've just seen my team win, and I was commentating on that one. I was doing it with Cecil Martin, and there was a moment because as much as was a passionate fan and all the rest of it, I'd never tried to let that cross over. I mean, maybe it did. I don't know. Other people would have to judge that. But I never wanted to be a fanboy. I'd always, if I was talking about the Steelers, I'd always try and be objective. If anything, sort of be a bit more negative on them. And I certainly never was a fanboy. But I saw, because of that high up position that we get, how Parker just broke that tackle and got an angle on that safety, and was nobody on the place short of bringing out an air rifle was going to stop him. And I just stopped. It was like, that's a 75-yard touchdown run. You know, I've never seen anything like that in my life. So there was a 2 or 3 seconds, probably no more than that, where I was just like, I mean, I've got an out-of-body experience here. It was absolutely incredible. Then it was like, settle myself back down, get back into it again. And I just went nuts that night. I went absolutely nuts that night. I had to. There was a newspaper called The Independent that I used to write for, and the big story was Jerome Bettis. It was his last game and all blah blah blah. And I went out and just drank loads of champagne that night with lots of other people. You know, you're always unwound after a Super Bowl anyway, because it was, you know, a lot of pressure and tension in the work. That was my excuse. And I had to file like an 800-word story next morning. And I went back to my room after goodness knows how much champagne and wrote this 800 words, knowing that I could just wake up and file that next day. And I woke up, read it, and I'd basically written a love sonnet to Jerome Bettis. And, you know, I'm looking at it going, this isn't going to work, is it? Yeah. So I basically had to do a total rewrite on it. You know, now sobering up and focusing very fast, because deadlines, you know, we're 5 hours, 6 hours behind them or whatever it was. I had to get this thing in. But yeah, so let's say that was the finish. But it was, I mean, Bettis had been such a star for that Steelers team. He was the heartbeat. It was his last game. It was in his hometown, the Steelers. So for me, that ticked every box. But obviously for anybody else, it was one of the worst Super Bowls ever, I suspect.
See, I mean, this is why I asked the questions, because I was sitting here and thinking, you're going to talk about 2009. It's going to be Santonio Holmes and the tiptoe catch in the corner, because two Super Bowls in 3-4 years you've got to experience like that. I know.
And my first one with Sky, Steelers lost Super Bowl 30 to Dallas, who were the big Steelers were the big underdogs, and they came back from the brink, and all the momentum had gone their way. I think they were within. They'd just forced another punt, and it was in the fourth quarter, and they were driving to win the game. And Neil O'Donnell threw an interception that even I would have caught. And you know, I just saw it, and I wasn't commentating at that point. I was just sitting in the stands, and it was like, he's just thrown the Super Bowl away, because you knew the momentum had gone. Dallas were dead; they were on their knees, having dominated 3/4 of the game, and the Steelers were going to come back and win it. So that's how my Sky career started, and it ended with Super Bowl, whatever the hell it was, 45, I think it might have been, Green Bay. In Dallas, you know the one where the roof fell in because of all that snow. One of the most ineptly organised Super Bowls ever. That was kind of a reason for it to get out, because when the Super Bowl is leaving you a bit flat, you probably outstayed your welcome. It is time to move on. So you know. But yeah, the last game I went to was it's funny. The first Super Bowl for Sky was seeing the Steelers lose, and the last one was seeing the Steelers lose. But in between, I got a couple of wins as well. So.
Yeah, it's just a fantastic run, and you've obviously mentioned that before we start recording that you made a bit of a career pivot after you run covering the NFL for so long and moved into in particular boxing coverage. But do you miss the NFL today?
Do you want the honest answer, or do you want the PR answer?
I think we want the honest answer.
No, I don't miss it at all. Don't miss it at all. I think it's very, very corporate. It's very, very sanitized. The characters were being forced out of it. The character was being forced out of it, and it's very, very, very corporate for me now. I was heading in that without even realizing it. While I was doing it, I was definitely for the last 2 or 3 years of my time at Sky doing it, I was definitely heading in that direction. I was starting to get, and that's not to say that I'm right, and the game is certainly thriving without me. They didn't need me, but yeah, for something that had been a genuinely big part of my life from 1982 when I first watched it, saying who are these Steelers that I've never heard of, to seeing the 2000 Super Bowl 50, 40, 45, I think it was. That's a long first Super Bowl 17, which I watched on TV, and John Riggins and the Washington Redskins. That's all still burned in my memory. So, but by the time it had finished, it was like I didn't intend to leave because, as I think I've already told you, Sky made me an offer I couldn't refuse. But when it had gone, I just found, don't miss it anymore. But I wouldn't swap it. I owe the game everything, because I've been getting away with blagging a whole career. I haven't had to work since 1986, because I've been involved in sport. So I've been incredibly lucky, and I owe all of it to American football, and I wouldn't change any of it. And I've had some fantastic experiences, met some wonderful people, done things that would make people jealous, been places, been worked with people, and it was a hell of a ride, and I loved every second of it. But when it ended, I was all right with that as well.
But really, really appreciate the candor, because we've spoken to people at various stages in their career. We've got some guests that are just starting out in the career, and others that have been played in the game and have gone on to move on and have second act. So I think everyone has that different experience. But I think, as you say, the one thing you can't take away is the time you did have in and around the game, and that really shines through. As you mentioned, obviously, you've been afforded other opportunities and gone on to commentate in boxing, in particular. Also doing some work with the EFL, and I believe you covered some winter sports as well. To really get a good mixture.
You're being a naughty boy here, Gav, aren't you? You're being a naughty boy.
I'm going to give credit to Dan here for the
guy who disappeared. Yeah, the guy who disappeared. Disappeared.
Yeah.
I did the Youth Winter Olympics. I think it was last year. That's what you're alluding to, isn't it? Yeah. This is again going back to the skin of the teeth stuff. It was the Youth Winter Olympics, and I was doing it for the Olympic Channel, which is what it sounds like. It's the IOC's own YouTube channel, where they basically put Olympic sports on and give them exposure year round. Rather than every 4 years we see the Olympics. And I was doing the Youth Winter Olympics. I was doing ice hockey and speed skating. And bearing in mind, we're talking 16 and 17-year-olds. So you've got no bios. There's nothing you can say about any of these people. And it's being done out of South Korea. But I'm in a box in Madrid in the middle of the night. And sat next to me in another box is somebody doing snowboarding, and there's somebody doing alpine skiing in the next box down the hall. And we're very limited in the information we're getting, other than a start list, basically. 2 is so and so from Norway, 3 is so and so from the Republic of Korea, and so on and so on. And I know enough about speed skating. It's a race, for goodness sake. I mean, it's who crosses the line first. It's not a manned mission to Mars. But there's also people getting disqualified, and some very dodgy decisions going on that I can see, that I'm not the expert. If a Korean gets pushed, it's like, right, you're out, whoever pushed him. But the Korean can push somebody. No, that's all right. That was going on. And anyway, I do this one event, this women's race, and I think she was a Chinese girl, only 16, shot off, just went off like you're like a greyhound. And so I'm thinking, oh, this is a big, brave move, really going for it here, and nobody's going with her. And I'm thinking, nobody's going with her, and now she's half, right at the start, she's half a length of half a lap ahead, and she gets and catches up with the rest of them. So I'm thinking, well, that's fantastic, but maybe, and I've second guessed myself now, maybe she'd been penalised a lap or something for something that I didn't even know about, because we're not getting that information. So now I've told myself, well, she might have been penalised for something and I don't know, So maybe I better just hold back a little bit rather than going, what an incredible race it is. And it just went on like that. So I'm talking about, and I'm hedging my bets desperately, trying to make it sound like I know what's going on, because I have no clue, genuinely no clue. And the bit that really, really caught me was we get the bell. Now, the bell's for that Chinese girl. These others, they've still got 2 laps. I missed that. And all those bloody skaters missed it as well. So they hear the bell. Now there's this mad scramble for the line. They get to the line. This one celebrates like this. And another one gets over and is, thinks she's got the silver or whatever it is. The Chinese girl at the back just sails in, at the end of it, but she's won by a whole lap. And a couple of the others are savvy enough to think, I've got to keep going here. And they did. And they then took the silver and bronze medals, whilst half of them, if not more, had actually stopped thinking, oh, well, I just heard the bell and we've done one more lap. And, some of them were in tears and heads have dropped and people slumped everywhere. And I'm still trying to think. And luckily, the camera cut to the Chinese girl who's now got the thing. And I said, oh, well, incredible. Oh, that tactic, it paid off. I'm thinking, did I say that earlier? Or did I say no? I can't remember what I've said. And, oh, well, it's brilliant. And I'm now waiting for a graphic to come up to see who's silver and bronze, because I have no clue, absolutely none, nothing. And I said, there's confirmation of what we already knew, so-and-so is second and so-and-so. Like I did know. But yeah, it's out there. It's on YouTube somewhere, isn't it? I think that I've not heard it, but it was chaos. It was chaos. And, and if you're going to ask me if I was under control and knew what was going on, no clue at all. No clue at all.
It just shows you, no matter what point you're in your career, maybe this is something for Sarah. We've got to run an instinct.
Yep, just keep going. It's fine. It'll all be all right.
Yeah, you can't freeze. I did a commentary at the 2006 Commonwealth Games on a sport called 3-cushion carom, which is a pool table with no pockets and a red ball, a white ball, and a white ball with a red dot on it. And I had to commentate on that. And the cameramen, who were snooker guys, had no clue, and I had no clue. And so I now feed off, in that situation, the energy of the crowd. There was nobody nobody in that crowd. So now, to see if they made a good shot or a bad shot, I look at the players. They're both from Myanmar, where to show any emotion is to risk a 20-year jail sentence. They are both sitting there at the end of every shot. So I've got nothing from them. And I'm just sitting there going, well, he's got options here. And, he'll take a shot. That may have been the best shot of all time, or it might have been the biggest miss of all time. And I had no idea. No clue at all.
It just shows you the world of sports is big and wide. And
well, it beats working for a living, Gav, I tell you. It beats working. No, nobody died because I didn't know what was going on. If you're in surgery and the surgeon don't know what's going on.
Well, we want to, I guess we're kind of coming to the end. I can just really want to thank you for your time, sharing some of your stories from, a career that still continues to take into new territories. But we've been really grateful for you joining us this evening. And
it's been a pleasure. No, thanks for having me. I hope, like I say, I genuinely hope it's not been boring as hell, because I've been a lucky so-and-so, and I'm, very privileged. So there are probably people, if anybody's thinking, oh, I wouldn't mind getting into that, I'd recommend it. But it's not for the faint-hearted either. It's a very insecure business as well. And with what I do, everybody's an expert. Everybody's an expert on commentary. But like I said, I couldn't do anything else, and I wouldn't want to do anything else. I've loved it, and I've loved being with you guys as well. I hope you've enjoyed it.
I really have. Thanks so much for joining us, Sarah.
Yeah, it's been amazing. Obviously, I'm going to show my age again, but as somebody who didn't grow up with like NFL Europe and stuff, I love hearing about it, because it's just such another world. And even like talking about how even the game grew from that to then. So my dissertation was all on the American experience in like the London Games and like the Europe Games. And it's just amazing to like see how it was and what it's now become. And even if it is a bit corporate, and even if it is a bit of a shtick, that's how I fell into the sport, was going to see it live. So
well, that's good. Well, the sport always needs new blood, doesn't it? You've got to have new people coming in, new fans coming in, and then everything changes. And yeah, that's how it should be. That's a good thing.
Absolutely. Well, thanks again very much for your time, Nick. Obviously, for those listening along at home, please don't forget to follow us on Spotify, on YouTube, and wherever you get podcasts. We've been Tartan Touchdown, and we'll speak to you soon.